Aloha everybody, this is Bodhi reporting from Maui CommunityInvestigation.com. This three-part video series is a rebuttal to the Lahaina Fire Report put out by the Underwriters Laboratory and Fire Safety Research Institute, April 17, 2024. Recently, Hawaii's Attorney General released Phase 1 of the Lahaina Fire Report, created by FSRI, known as Fire Safety Research Institute. It clearly makes several statements that this report was generated based on facts, pointing out their position on the fire and how it spread by direct flame, radiant heating, and flying embers. After reading through the report, I could find no mention of a prevailing wind that day. A wind that I know came out of the east-northeast the whole day. A prevailing wind is crucial to a complete report. It is the one telltale of how the fire will spread, so we understand how the fire traveled and how it couldn't. I was concerned as this report makes no mention of the 6:40 a.m. fire in the upper field below the Miko transfer station. Using their fire travel maps and Google Earth, it is my duty to bring to your attention any similarities or discrepancies while sharing the destructive path of the fire. My three-part video analysis of the entire region covers all of Lahaina, Puamana, and Waikuli. I make sure to point out the obvious and overlooked, as well as the unconventional path of destruction that defies science and logic. Mahalo for watching, and stay tuned for the next two videos. First, let's take a look at Chief Ventura of the Maui Fire Department, his presentation of how the fire traveled through Lahaina.
Based on the Maui Fire Chief's PowerPoint, the story you'll see only on KITV4. Jeremy is live with us from Lahaina. Jeremy, good morning.
Good morning. We learned that it took 1 hour for the fire to go from crossing the Lahaina bypass to making its way into town to arriving and crossing Honoapi'ilani Highway, which cuts through town. The fire was called in at 2:54 p.m. From that point, well, Fire Chief Brad Ventura's presentation to the commission shows us how the fire moved through Lahaina town.
Up in this area, 1,500 hours, our units were on scene, this area. By 1522, it had gone from the initial starting area to, it jumped the highway, and it was headed down south. By 1538, in this area here, we had multiple structures on fire already. 1627, it had already gotten below Honoapi'ilani Highway. Now remember, just like many of these large disaster fires and wildfires that are wind-driven, it doesn't mean that everything in between those last 2 points was completely consumed yet. Fire was traveling, and it was the growth of the fire was caused by embers being driven from area to area. So by 1627, we had fire below the highway area here. By 1727, over towards the cannery down below Kahoma, we had roofs of buildings on fire that was reported to us. And then later, by 1900, Puamana area, the Shaw Street and Front Street near Shaw was fully engulfed. And then later in the evening, Wahikuli, this area about 2133, that's when the homes were impacted on the north end of Wahikuli. At the very top.
Using Chief Ventura's fire presentation of where the fire started is where this video begins. Puamana to the right and Waikuli to the left. Zones 1, 2, and 3. Zone 1 from Lahaina Luna at the top all the way down to Front Street, while the border on the left is Kahoma Stream, and the border on the right is Lahaina Luna Road. What you see here looking at Google Earth is both borders on each side, along with everything outlined in yellow that are structures that didn't burn. Anything in red is either a fire line or something that completely burned. So here we're looking from the top down of Lahaina Luna to the bypass, from the bypass up Kahoma Stream, around the intermediate, and then up around the high school, displaying the solar farm. Then we move to the area where the fire first started, right below the Miko transfer station. From there, we move down to the next lot, right below the home in the cul-de-sac. And then we move on down to the third lot, where some of you might remember Eric West reporting on 2 vehicles that incinerated with no more fuel than just grass, dry grass. Very suspicious. And none of these houses on this side of Lahaina Luna Road had burned. Making our way below the bypass, this is where it gets pretty interesting. Despite these structures that were on fire being so close to the others, none of these above the red line caught fire. Now, I'm sure most of you will find this very interesting. This is a Chevy truck, and we're going to zoom in on it and then go down to ground level. Based on these pictures alone, it's going to be hard for me to believe that this was some ordinary fire. When a Chevy truck brand new like this can burn only halfway. As we zoom out, we can see the red outline. This is the boundary of the fire. We can see how it traveled with and against the wind. On the left, where the first home burned, the fire then traveled down and made a 90-degree right turn. Then it turned and traveled uphill. Then worked its way down to this home. Clearly, every home burned around this one. Looking closer, we can see fresh lumber for an addition on the home. It's interesting how there's no ember marks on the lumber or the roof. From here, the fire traveled down to the corner, then does a 90-degree left turn, then travels down until it makes another 90-degree right turn, then it double backs uphill. It crosses the road, then does another 90-degree right turn against the wind, taking out these 4 homes, then travels downwind through the rest of the housing tract. Moving down, I need to point out how these 5 custom homes went unscathed. When we zoom in, we can see no ember markings in the grass or on the roofs, but every home around these 5 completely incinerated just several feet away. And when we zoom out and we travel to the other side of the housing tract, there's 2 more homes over here that didn't get burned. And traveling back to the Coahoma Stream side, we see this one house here that went unscathed while everything else burned. Now, a little bit further down in the county maintenance yard, we see these 2 buildings here that didn't burn. And now we're going to travel over towards Lahaina Luna Road. And I cover just on the other side of Lahaina Luna the Federal Credit Union here on the corner that didn't get burned, while the Shell gas station across the street did. This building here didn't get burned. I don't know what building that is, but those 2 made it. Then we scroll down to the Foodland, and we see the building next to the Foodland didn't burn as well. So traveling over towards the shopping center here, we can see that one unscathed. But what's interesting is this property above it, towards Front Street, where the church was here. And all of these houses inside of the yellow boundary and trees even went unscathed. Then we move over to these 2 apartments that didn't burn while everything around them did. Then we cross the street and we look at these 5 buildings that didn't burn, but in the interior of it, the 3 did. From here, we move over towards 2 commercial buildings that went unscathed. And then we move over towards the mansions. Some people in Lahaina call them McMansions. But there's quite a few here that went unscathed as well. At least a dozen or more. And then we move over towards the coast a little bit, and we can see there are a few more right on the water here that didn't get touched at all. Nor, when you look in the grass, is there any type of ember markings. And then we move over toward the boat launch. We can see nothing over there burned. None of the sheds or buildings that they have there. Now, this is what I find interesting. This is a very large village here. I'm not sure if it's condos or townhomes, but quite a few number of them. But when we look carefully in the center here and we zoom down in, we see there are just 4 of these structures, similar to the others, that burned, but nothing else did. And looking at the grass, no embers. No ember markings. From there we move across the highway and we see that there are these 5 structures that went unburnt. In Zone 1, I showed you 19 areas outlined in yellow that shows all the structures that didn't burn that day. From the top of Lahaina Luna, below the bypass, I showed the path the fire took, making 90-degree turns heading back up into the wind. There was over 100 structures that did not burn in Zone 1. In my next video, Zone 2, Pu'umana, there are even more unique incidents of how the fire traveled and what structures it did and did not burn. So I hope you will join me again in my discoveries of this fire. Thanks for watching.